Hello, I'm Mark Schwartz, a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, and I'm going to teach part 2 of a series, World War II Economics and Production. Part 2 will deal with pre-war America and our transition to go to war and to produce for war. Here is our agenda for this lesson. Take a look at it. What you'll see is we will start in the Depression. We will look at how the rest of the world was at war while we were shut down. But things were happening in the United States, some gems, which would pay off later. For example, out of the Depression came advances in economic theory and statistics. We had people who were leaders in business who were ready to lead us into a manufacturing surge. And we'll look at some of the case studies, things that look at people like Henry Kaiser and his Liberty ship building operation, Ford, and the B-24 Liberator bomber plant in the Detroit area. So we come out of the Depression and production surges to record levels. And in fact, the economists were that good, their tools were that good, they could project when D-Day would happen based on when our production would give us all that we needed in the way of armaments. Here you see our books. We will draw from these books in this particular lecture and throughout the course. And they are selected because they profile leaders in business, leaders in the military who planned, and how the different groups, to include workers, brought everything together. Okay, go to the syllabus, look at the assignments out of this set of books for the various readings you need to do, and there will be supplemental readings via PDF. Now, as promised, we want to look at what was happening while America was in the Depression. And it appears the Axis nations were very busy fomenting war while we languished in depression and poverty. You look at Japan, as early as 1931, they were into Manchuria, later into China itself. War of aggression. Italy, same thing, as of the mid-1930s. They were into the Mediterranean and the Spanish Civil War. Germany, 1936, the Rhineland, the Spanish Civil War, the Anschluss into Austria and Czechoslovakia, and finally the Blitzkrieg. So all of these nations were busy making ready for war, not only their military, but their manufacturing, and they had the benefit of knowing when, where, and how the wars would start. The United States didn't have that benefit, but somehow we made a wartime surge. And we went from the Depression, if you look at the left side, Depression era of about 10 or so years, we were in economic stagnation. We'd lost confidence in ourselves. We were isolationist. Politically, a lot of people were tuned out, and it was a war between the New Dealers and Republicans who opposed it. So nothing happened. It was stagnated. Yet during the war years, the 1941 to 45, we quickly transitioned to full employment. We were confident. We had direction politically and socially. We ended up the war as a world power with more wealth than any other nation. So what happened? Did a miracle happen? Was this magic and it just occurred by itself? No, it didn't happen by itself. The right people were in the right places with the tools and the knowledge how to do this. And we'll look at some things that came out of the Depression. For example, statistical economics. During the Depression, a few visionary economists had come up with tools which allowed them to focus and funnel resources to the right places at the right times. We went into mass production where we had reliable and maintainable weapon systems. The things we manufactured starting the war. Detroit could manufacture car parts down to 1/100th of an inch machining tolerance. That's beginning, okay? And it was far better than any other country could. And we got better as we went. So that difference of 1/100th of an inch, less than a millimeter, means that parts are interchangeable. They come off the line, they fit in something going off to war like a tank or an airplane. And when you're bringing spare parts out to maintenance out in the field, they fit. And if we need some more evidence of why production and economics are important to us, look at the two charts we have here. We're going to compare the Allies in blue against the Axis nations in red. Okay, three leading Allied producers, America, Britain, Russia, and the three Axis nations. And we compare them for 3 years, 42 to 44. And you look at the aircraft side left on the chart. The Allies produced almost 300,000 airplanes versus 115,000 for the Axis. That's better than 2.6 to 1. So if both sides produce good airplanes, you've got this ratio, this imbalance that favors the Allies. And this overcame any Axis superiority with the Germans building jets. Look at tank production. That's even in greater imbalance here. Again, the three same Allied and Axis countries. The Allies produced almost 200,000 tanks in those 3 years. The Axis, about 40,000. That's a ratio of 4.7 to 1. So even if the Germans had the Panther and Tiger tanks, which were reputed to be the best, they only produced 7,000 to 8,000 of them total. So the Allies, with the M4 Sherman and the Soviet 76 tank, or T-34, I'm sorry, with the 76 millimeter gun, they had more than enough tanks to overwhelm the Germans. So motivator, yes, economics and production are vital to winning a war. And so Stalin said that if you're fortunate, you can produce machines and send machines to war instead of people. He should know his country lost somewhere around 25 million people, whereas we lost somewhere around 400,000 dead in combat and training accidents. When we started the war, we had protection from battle damage, the two oceans. We had a workforce that was ready to go to work. They were still trained. We had raw materials and a good transportation system. So once we were able to rise out of the Depression, which occurred because of war contracts from England and France, airplanes primarily, in the 1939-40 time period, that was the primer that started our industrial surge. Okay, once we were in the war, isolationism went away, and we were able to become the arsenal for democracy. And we will look as we go through this lesson at Ford and the bomber production, the Liberty ships for Kaiser. Amazing stories. So when we're in the Depression, and we lingered in the Depression quite a number of years, the economy was in tatters. Unemployment was at least 25%. Some economists said much higher. Factories were closed, the workforce was scattered, and very little had been done in worker training. In fact, for the Depression years, we were still not able to reach the level of our 1929 output. But in order to cope with the Depression, these leading industrial organizations were developing leadership management skills. And like I said, if you can manufacture down to 1/100th of an inch, you've got good quality products. But here, also think about what the leadership, not only the managers at Ford and Kaiser Industries had to think about, but our government leaders. Okay, here you see the Hydra from Greek mythology, a multi-headed beast, and every head is snapping at you. It needs to be fed. Each head needs to be fed now. But how do you make these choices? Do I have to give weapons to my allies? Do I need to invest in better plants and better transportation? How am I going to get trained workers when the military is going to grow to 13 million people? So decision makers had to make many, many difficult choices, and everything said, I need this now. I don't care what the other needs are. So think as we work through some of these case studies, think about the issues here. If you're a government manager or an industrial manager, and you have to deal with all of this.